Hello there, good morning. Thank you for choosing Citizen TV on this 12th day of December 2023. This is Citizen TV, a special coverage of the Jamhuri Day, the 60th anniversary of the nation. Of course, you may remember what happened on the 12th of December 1963, the country becoming independent, and it has been a 6-decade journey, the country to getting to this point. You may recall the promise and the dedication of the founding father, Jomo Kenyatta, speaking about the 3 key issues: the war against poverty, the war against ignorance, and the war against disease. How far have we come? It is 6 decades, and we'll be talking about this with my panelists here in studio that I'll be introducing. They come from different institutions. I'll also be joined by one more person that will be here to talk us through the journey of 60 years, the progress made, and so much more. Of course, we're expecting the president to lead the nation in celebrating this 60th Jamhuri Day, and that will be happening at the Uhuru Gardens, where our crew is already on the ground. Ayub Abdikadir is there and has been monitoring the situation. Good morning, Ayub. Of course, a very important day for the country to mark 6 decades of existence in terms of as a nation of independence. What can you tell us this morning?
Good morning, Sam, from the Uhuru Gardens, which in itself bears a significant chapter in Kenya's independence history. And here, since becoming independent after the end of the colonial era, here Kenyans are gathered today. They streamed in as early as 5 a.m. and a bit about their country and what their leaders are going to be saying here today, as has been the tradition. The head of state, President William Ruto, will be leading the celebrations here at the Uhuru Gardens. And some of the specific items and agenda that the Kenyan people expect the government to speak about or the head of state to address include, at the moment, what appears to be the stark reality of the economy and also the state of political stability. And here we have been monitoring.
All right, apologies for that hitch. We'll be sure to correct it and get back to Ayub, who is already on the ground to tell us about the latest. But as he says, that the people have been arriving from 5 a.m. To get there to witness the celebrations that should be coming in the next few hours. But I have Petronila Mukaindo, who is the Deputy Director and Head of Research at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I have Angela Mbuthia, who is from the Jubilee Party. She is the chairperson of the Jubilee League, Youth League. How are you?
Angel, Sam.
Oh, Angel. Sorry.
It's all right. Thank you.
Karibu sana to the show. And I'm also expecting Dr. Hassan Khanenje from the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies will be here shortly to join us in this conversation. But let me begin with you, the young person representing the youth, because the theme we understand this time around is also looking at the potential of the youth and celebrating them. 60 years, a 60-year-old person is getting closer to the years of a senior citizen. As a country, how have we walked that journey?
First of all, Sam, I'd like to appreciate the young men and women who fought for the independence of this country 60 years ago. I mean, they sacrificed so much to bring us to where we are today. They left their homes, they left their families. They sacrificed so much at that time to go and spend their time in the forest so that they can confront the enemy of that time. And for that, we salute them, I salute them. And today, when we look at Kenya, even broadly on the continent, you'll see that our neighbors in the southern part have been grappling with a lot of issues, the main ones being racism. And one thing I can appreciate as a Kenyan is that I have no experience of racism. Like we see in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in all those other countries that are in the south that really gained independence much, much later, and how that progression has affected them years down the line as you compare to Kenya. When you go to a South African parliament, they first of all debate who is black and who is white before they even start to discuss youth issues, women issues, foreign issues. They have to grapple with that first. And because of that, we must celebrate the people who made sure that we got got independence at the time we got independence. And even when we looked at the continent around that time, we could see that Kenya was not very far from even the first country that gained independence. In 1957, Ghana gained independence as the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to gain independence. And then shortly, we come in about 5 or 6 years later. So it was a movement across the continent that was spearheaded by young people, especially student leaders across the continent, agitated for independence. And that's why we are here today. So I want to celebrate the young people, particularly of that time. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you said that the students were at the forefront of that. We know the challenges there was at that time, and we'll be getting to talk about that all the way from the segregated schools up until what we have now. But talk to me, Petronilla, about, yes, the question has always been asked about how we honor our heroes, that basically the reason why we are now marking 60 years. How have we walked that journey? And are we keeping the memory to ensure that whatever we do as a nation, we remember the cost it took to get here?
Yes, thank you very much, Sam, for having me here today. As we celebrate Jamhuri Day today, it's very important to actually have a throwback at where we were before we got the independence. What is it that we were getting independent from? And you know, when we were under the British colonial rule, of course, we had all these sorts of human rights issues, including segregations, discrimination of the Africans, non-representation, issues of land, you know, all that. And finally, we come and get independence after, of course, a long fight and struggle for inclusion of the African in the governance system. It is worth celebrating that journey, celebrating that liberation, and that then as a country we got to have that self-determination. Now, how have we walked that journey? I would say that it's a mixed bag. We definitely are not where we were you know, 60 years ago. We have made, you know, a myriad steps. When you look, you know, in different spectrums, in different ways. If you look at the political landscape, we are looking at coming from a very highly centralized system where it was very heavily the, you know, the big man syndrome. Mtu mmoja ni yeye kusema, and as a country, you remember from Manjimbo, we then go again to the attempts to actually again go back to centralized power, where now we are having a bit more concentration of power in the presidency, and then the continued struggle through the multi-party democracy, all the way through the you know, the 1990s, and that is when also the issues of human rights, especially there was a lot of outcry on the human rights violations. You recall the Nyayo torture chambers and etc. So then again, moving again to the journey of promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, which again then brought quite a huge promise for the Kenyans, and the devolved system of governance, which then has served to, in many ways, really sort out quite a number of issues that were plaguing us at independence. We are more inclusive society. There is more participation in terms of democratic space. At the counties, we've opened it more. But there are still major challenges still remain. We are still, you know, the mindsets is still wanting to sometimes go back to that system. We are forgetting sometimes as a country where we've come from. So to answer you in short term is that we have made a huge progress in the 60 years, but there have been major setbacks. And as a commission, as the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights, we can actually see then the journey, and we've been able to point out some of the still glaring issues that we need to deal with across the spectrum, whether it is economic, social, cultural rights issues that we are still dealing with, whether it's an issue of political inclusion and you know, the inclusion of the marginalized persons and people with disabilities, the women, etc., and also group rights, whether we are talking of children, etc.
And it's interesting you speak about inclusion, because I was going to ask you, who is being included? Because there's a tendency, and it has become the basis for politics, that speak about those at the bottom of the pyramid. If you look at even our systems, whether it's education system, health system, there are challenges that if you are not economically empowered, you're sort of excluded or at the mercy of what remains. How do we improve that? Because out of the three goals, we still struggle with that: ignorance, poverty, and disease.
Yes, thank you for that question. Now, who is being included? Let me start there. You asked that. It is all of us. And again, it is good to examine that coming back from the history where we are coming from as a country. Now, once we took over independence, of course, in the initial regimes, you could see a very clear trend of then ethnicization of politics. So that if I came from a certain tribe, then you could see there is a tendency that the public service and the appointees are largely from that community. And now, when we so more politics became more, to some extent, an avenue to get power and therefore accumulate. When you get power, you get access to resources. And when you get access to resources, your people also benefit. You get so that then needed to wither away. So who is being included? It is we are looking at a country that includes all of us, all the 47, now at 50 million persons. And especially then those who have been most left behind throughout the years. Who are they? These are the ethnic minorities, who then, if they were not in government, then you would struggle to get even government services, to get, appointments. Who is being included? They are the vulnerable groups, and that we are talking of the older persons. Right. We are talking of the children. We are talking of persons with disabilities. So how do we make this national cake shareable for all of us as a people, because we all belong to this nation?
Okay. Allow me to cut you short, because we need to cross back to the Uhuru Gardens. Ayub Abdikariu now is able to speak to us better. Ayub, you were saying something.
Good morning, Sam, and thank you. We are live from the Uhuru Gardens, where 60 years after independence, today Kenyans again are gathered here in anticipation of an address to the problems that are bedeviling their country. Some of them who are here might not have been there when the country gained independence, but they are here to hear from the leadership and the address that will be given by President William Ruto. As early as 5 a.m., the gates here were open and Kenyans were seated in anticipation and patiently so of their leaders today in wanting to hear about how the challenges, be it political, economical and social, that still faces the country after independence 60 years later can be addressed. And we managed to speak to some of them. They were upbeat, they were happy, and they were concerned, and to some degree again, about how the country at the moment is governed, how it has been governed under the previous administration since 1963. And this year's Jamhuri Day celebrations here at the Uhuru Gardens are themed around the Kenyan youth, the creative economy, and sports. These are three areas that the current administration under President William Ruto, and who has been passionately speaking about these three areas, appears to be the theme that will drive today's celebrations here at the Uhuru Gardens. We expect the seating capacity to be a maximum of 30,000, according to the communication that was issued by the Principal Secretary at the Ministry of Interior and National Administration, Dr. Raymond Omolo, who was here for the week-long preparations in anticipation of today's successful event and the smooth preparation process that the government had embarked on, and an exercise that will actually also be taking place also across the devolved units in the 47 counties. Now back to the thematic area of the Kenyan youth, the creative economy and sports. As early as yesterday, when the head of state signed into law the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Bill, now an act, He talked about how this is going to be a job creation opportunity and platform for the Kenyan youth, now that some money will go into the establishment of ICT hubs, which he said will help in the creation of opportunities and employment for the young Kenyans, expressing his concern as well as the head of state about the country's youth bulge and how that can be addressed by his administration, saying that there are proper plans in place. Also in terms of the creative economy, how the young Kenyans can tap into that opportunities that the government is providing at the moment to create jobs and be job creators, and this to shift their attention away from what has been the tradition to depend on the white-collar jobs that the government has been providing, and a shrinking space for that matter, then the focus now shifting to the creative economy, where young Kenyans can be able to create opportunities for themselves and make money out or earn a living out of using their creativity in terms of coming up with the ideas on the digital platforms that apparently appear to be driving the global world. Then the third aspect about sports is an area that the head of state also was clear about when he came into power in September last year. And you recall one of the major achievements in regards to that is that Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania will be co-hosting the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations in the East African region. The announcement, which was made in the Egyptian capital Cairo, is going to be one that will act as a springboard for President William Ruto's administration in focusing its attention on the sporting industry in Kenya. And just against the backdrop of the country's under-18 team that came the second in the just concluded Sekava under-18 that was held here in the country, and after the title was won by the Ugandans. This tells you how the investments, and there is goodwill at the moment from the administration in terms of focusing its adequate attention on sports. Therefore, the theming around the three thematic areas of the Kenyan youth, the creative economy, and now sports. However, here today, whatever is happening, Sam, and to our viewers who are watching us across the country and also the world, is that the three issues that were outlined by the embryonic administration in 1963 appear to be again the stark reality that has accompanied all previous administrations to where we are at the moment. The problem of sorting our education system, our healthcare system, political stability appears to be dotting again the previous administration, as was the case with the underpinning factor of the other previous administrations as well. This is what policymakers at the moment here in Kenya and also in the successive governments after independence have been grappling with. What's therefore required are answers, and Kenyans here today are anticipating answers to be provided to how these issues can be sorted out. A properly functioning healthcare system, an education system that provides a level playing field for all Kenyans to access adequate and therefore equitable education, where they can be at a proper place to access education, and therefore that providing an ample shot that is fair for them in life to progress. And also the question of political stability, all coming around after every electoral cycle, and this largely stemming out of the political establishment and the concerns that always accompany our electoral process. Beyond that also, Sam, Kenyans here will today be witnessing the three heads of states and governments who will be here for the Jamhuri Day celebrations at Uhuru Gardens. The names have not been revealed yet, but we have seen the presence of presidents and heads of state who were in Nairobi yesterday and received by President William Ruto at State House in Nairobi. Among them is the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko and the head of the President of Lesotho, who was here as well at State House and received by President William Ruto. That tells you that we'll be expecting the other name to be revealed of the guest of honor who will be here today in the company of those two. That's if they will be here and to witness what will be a historic moment for Kenyans here at the Jamhuri, at the Uhuru Gardens, to mark 60 years since Kenya became a republic, and therefore a significant chapter in Kenya's history and their presence here and in the company of President William Ruto. We expect the head of states in his speech to also touch on the question, now that the year is ending, of the economy and the cost of living, now that Kenyans will be going into the festive season concerned about the value of the shilling in their pocket, the shrinking or the squeezed household budget because of the economic situation, and the governments at the moment appear to be positioned that it's holding of reducing the cost of hunger prices in the country, saying that much has gone into the fertilizer subsidy program, of focusing on the production away from the consumption, it said, has had effect on the economy, saying that now the burden on the shoulders of Kenyans has been alleviated, and the focus now is on how to prop up the economy going into the new year in 2024. And the head of state therefore expected to address the economy, and that appears to be also the appreciation made by the government of the economic situation, as well as Kenyans who will be here, seated here today in anticipation of the soothing words and the appealing tone that they expect the government and the head of state to strike on how the economy can be addressed, what the festive season will look like, and going into the new year, how the economy will be, and them to feel the value of the shilling, to bring down the cost of basic commodities, and how that will spur up the economic progress of the country, one that President William Ruto says is now stable and the government is full control of the economy. Some therefore will be monitoring around what will be happening here, and the guests continue to streaming, will be of course watching closely who will be coming. And shortly in the next live link, I'll be joined by my colleagues Chemutai Goen and Stephen Leto to give you an assessment of how the situation is here at the Uhuru Gardens for the Jamhuri Day celebrations. Back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Ayub Abdikadi. Very interesting commentary there, but also the very interesting pictures that we continue to see the arrival of some of the local talents, some of whom you've watched for a very long time on Citizen TV. And joining us also is Dr. Hassan Khanenje, Director, Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies. Good morning.
Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm all right.
And happy Jamhuri Day.
Happy Jamhuri Day to you.
Yes.
And we've been here talking about what you're celebrating, reflecting on the vision of our forefathers. If you are to look at the two dailies on the front page of the Daily Nation, you'll see dreams of our fathers rather. And at independence, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, our founding father, had lofty dreams for the country, ones that would free its citizens from poverty, ignorance, hunger, and disease. But 60 years later, and with the fifth president just one year into office, it's a mixed bag for Kenya. And of course, extensive coverage of some of the details, including the progress that has been made in terms of education, health, the number of doctors, what has happened to the employment sector, the public sector, private sector, number of jobs created. And of course, the statistics show that in 1965, the data from KNBS was showing that 2 million jobs had been created. As of 2022, it was 19.3 million. Those that were actively employed in 1965 were 1.8 million. In 2022, 19.1 million. And of course, so much more that you find on the Daily Nation. Then on the Standard, the main story is country in darkness. Sunday's national outage resulted in huge losses for businesses, nightmare for hospitals without backup generators, and frustrations for millions of homesteads. The Energy CS blamed the frequent blackouts on a lack of investment and said rationing, especially in Western Kenya, will help even as roads CS blamed JKIA power cut on sabotage. I mean, what a day and what a headline to be marking these 60 years. Dr. Khanenje, talk to me about your reflections of that journey, the progress we've made, but also the challenges we face today.
60 years of independence. It looks like a very long time, but it's also a very short time. Kenya is a fairly young country compared to especially some of the advanced economies and democracies around the world, compared to some of the civilizations that are thousands of years old, like the Chinese or the Persians, and the like. And comparatively, you would say Kenya has done fairly. However, compared to where we were at the time and the kind of dreams that our forefathers and mothers espoused at the time, I think we have a lot more to do and we have more work to do. It is critical that we have some time for introspection to see where some things have gone wrong. You mentioned about, for instance, the power blackout in the country. I almost thought, well, 60 years in the dark. If 60 years we are still in the dark, then that's a problem. Now, in all fairness, Kenya is one of the countries, is actually the most electrified country in the region, despite the fact that we don't produce a lot of electricity, that could be sufficient for ourselves. even Ethiopia that now has the Great Renaissance Dam, I think only has reached about 45% of population. Kenya is almost around 80%. So that's a good thing. But we need to manage our affairs well. Now, going back to the founding fathers, one thing that I think has been lost, especially on the younger Kenyans, and when I say younger Kenyans, a lot of people under 40 years old, so nowadays perhaps under 45. There's been a lack of appreciation of Kenya's history and the struggle and the pain that went into getting independence. Kenya was one of the few countries on the continent that was actually a settler colony and that engaged in a bloody struggle against independence, together with countries such as Algeria, Zimbabwe, or South Africa. Whenever we talk about struggle for independence, I think an average Kenyan may think all African countries struggle equally. No, Kenya paid a heavy price because the British never had intentions of leaving. That's why we're called a settler colony. And to the extent that those dreams right now seems to be pipe dreams, I think it is something that we need to revisit. Have we achieved the kind of equity economically that we needed? Absolutely not. Do we have sufficient representation across the board? Even going back to our recent constitution in 2010, you realize we're still struggling with inclusion. But fundamentally, ethically, how are we doing? We've become extremely obsessed with positions and accumulation that is completely obscene, to the extent that younger people no longer aspire to be competent in anything. They just want to be able to get money or get political positions so they can be able to accumulate. And we need to change that culture. If you travel around the world, you're going to realize countries that have actually made progress is because they care for each other. Each citizen, or at least most citizens, understand what their responsibilities are, and they don't celebrate mediocrity, they don't celebrate idiocy or corruption, And so, misbehavior, malfeasance is punished. Human rights violations are not rewarded; they're punished. There's a gentleman, I think these past few weeks, who was narrating at great length, was former of the special branch, with regard to what happened to Dr. Robert Ouko. How come up to now we've never really resolved that problem? So if we cannot resolve that, someone who was that high-ranking, how can we guarantee other Kenyans their human rights as well as civil liberties? Those are some of the questions that some of us have been reflecting upon.
Very interesting, and a very interesting way of looking at our history and the journey that you have walked. And Angel, again, he points to the question of inclusion. And another very interesting point that he says, that the young people are no longer interested in hard work. They want positions and quick money. How much of that do you relate with as you lead the Youth League at the Jubilee Party? And what would you say has pushed them to that corner, if at all that is the reality?
Sam, I think that our country has evolved, and when you look at since independence and now, especially in the sector of education, because I believe that education is one of the best equalizers we have today in this century. But immediately we gained independence, what we needed as a country was to give the country the skeleton it needed. We needed the manpower to do that. So there were many opportunities, especially in government, and then that went on to feed onto the flesh of the nation. And then moving on in the later years of Mwai Kibaki, I mean, he went into investing a lot more into education, because that ended up to fleshing out, the skeleton of this nation. And we see a lot of progress when we talk about the free primary education, which he announced when he was in a wheelchair a few days after being elected. And I think that was a very powerful move that he made at that time, and ensuring that young people were able to access education. And then that went on ahead to seeing to it that so millions of kids were able to access primary education. And then when Uhuru Kenyatta now comes in, he talks about 100% transition, because you cannot have 1 million kids in sitting for KCPE, and then 200,000 sitting for KCSE, and then 50 or 60,000 going into a college or a university. So when we look at our state of the nation today, and when we look at education, which is the power, the mindset, the flesh, the generator of this country, going into a financing model that is set to make sure that education is only for the rich is something that we really need to call, is what I want to hear from the president today. Because when you tell me that I am a proud beneficiary of free primary education, I am a beneficiary of government scholarships into the university, and that means that with what we are seeing from the Ministry of Education is that we are not going to have young people like myself being able to access education. And that means that someone else who is born today or who is fairly a teenager at this time is not going to be able to sit in platforms like this to express themselves because they will not have had an opportunity to access education. We cannot leave bright and needy students in the village and think that we can transform this country. We need to ensure that each and every kid in this country has an opportunity to access education. But when we talk about inclusion, education is one of those facets we have as a country. When we have high rises, when we have the technology, when we have roads and all that infrastructure, but the people are not empowered, and that is something that we brag about as a country. Human capital, our human force, our workforce that we power to the rest of the world is something that we celebrate as Kenyans. The returns we get as a country from abroad are because of the kind of people that we have educated in this country, gone abroad to look for opportunities, get opportunities, become excel, do very well abroad and bring back their dollars home, and we don't want to continue investing in that, then I don't see a matter of inclusion moving forward. We have made very critical political decisions in the past, especially in the area of education, but we are not seeing more of that. Even when we talk about the issues of women in the country, when we do not adhere to the 2/3 gender rule, and we want to talk about 50% of the population being left out of the decision-making table, is another area of inclusion that we are not. 50% of the population, which is the population of women in Kenya, are not on the decision-making table. Then that begs the question, where are we looking as a country in terms of inclusivity? We are not allowing the most critical mass of the population to be able to access decision-making spaces. Even when we talk about young people wanting to be in government, it's because of what we've seen in government. It's only in a Kenyan government where you go to make money, where you go to drive the best cars after 1 year of joining government. That is not the way it's supposed to be. We need to ensure that all our resources are channeled to the building and the construction of this country. But
Angel,
when we
still, I hear you, but still, even those dedicated, that's what they are going into. Is it that the education is not serving them? Or what's going on?
We have not created enough opportunities for young people to be able to get into. I mean, and the best role models that we are showcasing are the ones who are in government. That if you're in government, even if you're a PA of a governor or a PA of a member of a county assembly, you have access to resources. And when we talk about corruption issues, and we saw the president talk about corruption during the State of the Nation address, saying that he will deal ruthlessly with people who are found to be dealing in corruption, but we've not seen anything go on so far. And that's why we are a country in darkness.
How do we change that narrative, Petronila?
Yes, let me start from the point that, I mean, when we were gaining independence in 1963, we were a smaller population, I think under 10 million, I think probably 8 million, around 8-10 million, in number. Now, as we speak, 60 years later, we have grown exponentially. We are now talking of around 50 million Kenyans. Now, so you have more children in the family, but the resources largely remain. Issues, and I mean, when I say resources, I mean, for instance, even land and other core resources. They remain largely the same. So what there is a lot more demand. There is more youth. The number of youth in the 1963 is not the number of youth today. On the one hand, there is the stress, the demand, the increased demand, which then means that as policymakers, as people in government and people sitting in the in the various spaces we are in, they need to match up the accelerating. The accelerating population growth with the provision of opportunities, of services, and all that. Now, But also something else, Sam. I think that as a society is also to ask, what are we modeling? What have we been modeling to the youth? What have we been glorifying? What are we honoring as a nation? When we talk, for instance, on Mashujaa Day and we are giving awards, what is it that we honor? Because then the young ones are learning from us. They are learning that if I pass around with a very huge car, everybody stands in the way, and you know, I'm a hero in the village, regardless of how I obtain. So what values, what societal values have we been modeling, so that then our youth, our young ones, are not then so much looking at the quick wealth. That is not the focus. And of course, wealth is not bad. It's a good thing. But if, of course, if it's well, you know, earned in the right way. But how do we change that so that then, when we are talking of also the youth and we are including them and we're including all of us, when you're given an opportunity, then it's an opportunity to serve in the public. It's an opportunity to actually. What is driving you is an opportunity to make life better for the others, and not actually the greed to accumulate the wealth. Don't we have enough role models? Are we lacking in that? So I would interrogate that. Yeah. But I would also say that because of the stress, and I'm happy to note that. I noted the Kenya Kwanza manifesto actually highlighted when on the section around job creation, because the job creation came out very strongly, and the promise to the youth. And in that manifesto, the government actually acknowledges that every year we turn over 800,000 youth. And yeah, education, we are doing very well in terms of infrastructure. I mean, everywhere you turn, there is a university college. Every then college has a university charter. TVETs have grown exponentially. And thanks to the 100% transition efforts, we're also having school leavers in the droves. So then where do these youth people go, young people go to? You see, like Enjo is saying, so unless then our efforts also match the skills and the numbers that we are having yearly, whether it's socio-economic, expanding this cake, then there's bound to be a problem. It's no wonder, Sam, that actually a report, I think it was a national survey by NACADA, actually showed that quite a number of youth are then having to turn to things like drugs. And then that brings in also issues of mental health issues because of disillusionment, you feel hopeless.
Right.
So because if the private sector can only accommodate this much, the public sector can only accommodate this much. So to what extent are we then matching? And also, of course, acknowledging the government efforts in terms of trying to create jobs abroad and all that. But of course, in terms of the numbers that we are dealing with, it's actually a crisis. And so we need to do more. We need to do more to empower and create opportunities for the youth. And because there is then a lot of talent, and then there needs to be modeling of the values, the right values for our youth, so that then we are looking not so much to really, it's not just a matter of flashy, that's not necessarily what we glorify, and it's not bad if actually it is earned the right way, so that then we recalibrate to what is the soul of our nation, what is it that we honor, what is it that we value, and then we can expect our young ones, the youth, and the rest of the society to follow suit.
I feel you're saying that we need to move away from wealth accumulation into wealth generation. And I don't know how we do that, because the crisis of unemployment, I mean, it's getting worse. As late as yesterday, there are several hundreds of young people that are queuing along the road leading to the NSSF, because NSSF had advertised some 53 pages of job opportunities. And they're not queuing to go for interviews. They're queuing to drop their applications. You don't even know if they are going to be invited for interviews. Even how will NSSF make a decision on who qualifies? This is manual application. How are they going to peruse all those CVs, all those application letters and testimonials that they have attached to decide who fits to do what job? Dr. Khanenje, what do we then learn from history? You highlighted a few of the countries that have gone ahead of us, and you've had the opportunity to study abroad. What then are the lessons we must pick? Because we have a generation here that, yes, they've gone to school, never mind whether they're educated or not, but they've gone to school and they're out here, they're looking for opportunities they cannot find, but life has to go on.
First, as leadership, it is important that we walk the talk. Often, our rhetoric does not match our reality. There's what you say, and there's what we do. During the March to Washington, Tom Mboya was one of the few leaders, and the only African leaders, who was actually allowed to speak in the I Have a Dream speech. And he pointed out that the tragedy that is common to all the black people around the world was poverty, ignorance, and disease. And those are kind of cardinal principles that formed the initial thinking of our founding fathers and mothers that they sought to eradicate. However, some countries have gone ahead. Some of the colonized people liberated themselves, and they're now advanced economies, or at least seriously emerging economies. Yet, as we speak, we are still trying to build a road to the village, while they are busy going to the moon, if I have to use Professor Ali Mazroui's words. We are still trying to get to the village. There is a challenge. There's certain things in which ways in which economics work. And if we do not have policies that can be able to grow an economy, of course, we surely should expect that you're always going to have unemployment. Second, I think for some of us who've been around a little bit, we know that it's not just about education. It's what type of education are you giving young people? I'm on record of having said this in many instances, that a good number of Kenyan young people, it's not just that they don't have employment. A good number of our graduates, they are unemployable, completely unemployable. You know, and the reason is the type of education has been given to them. Number one, does not fit the job market. Two, is not sufficient to make them competitive for job, or actually if you are to give them a job, it becomes a challenge. And my sister here mentioned infrastructure of education. And we've expanded, university education, tertiary education, and name it, extensively. Some of us have always argued that we need less degrees and we need more competence and technical skills. There are fewer plumbers per capita than we've ever had. There are fewer electricians per capita than we've ever had. You have people who are engineers who would not know the difference between a clutch and an accelerator in a car. So of what use is that? Go to all advanced economies. We've come to believe that if you're not wearing a tie or dressed nicely, then that's not a job. The truth is, in the West, the most well-paying jobs are not for those people who are wearing ties. But we are lacking basic technical skills. Now, what does that mean? In a globalized economy, a lot of countries, whether even Mexico, whether it's India, whether it's in the Philippines, name it, Indonesia, they are growing in part because of foreign investment through outsourcing. Why? Because they have trained enough personnel to be able to undertake those jobs, whether they're programmers or they're engineers and stuff like that. So if we are not training those people, how do we expect that, for instance, Ford or Hewlett-Packard, whose former CEO is actually an ambassador to Kenya today as we speak, they're going to invest in Kenya without actually people who can be able to assemble computers? You see? And so part of it has been we're giving our children wrong education. We're not training them for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And so they get out there, they have a useless degree, walking around with it, that I've gone to school and I don't have a job. No, you have a paper, you don't have knowledge. And there's a difference, And
hold it at that.
Yes.
So get back to that. You have a paper, no knowledge. At the Uhuru Gardens, the proceedings are yet to kick off, but I want us to listen into what's transpiring there. Our crew is there, bringing you the live images. Listen.
Sikujua, oh bibi, ukuishi kimapenzi wewe, mwana baba.
All right, someone in studio is enjoying that music. Dr. Khanenja, you're telling me something.
Yes, I was saying, those the old school, old time music that actually used to have wisdom. The music of yesteryears, they always had words that spoke to our lives.
Yeah.
In a way that was actually positive, at the same time was entertaining. And by the way, they played real instruments, not computers.
Wow. Interesting reflections of 60 years of independence. Ayub Abdikadir is there. Ayub, do you relate to that music?
Well, Sam, good morning, and we are live again from the Uhuru Gardens. Yes, of course, any Kenyan who is here is definitely related to that, and the dancing moves here clearly tell you about how happy the Kenyan people are and the anticipation of what's going to be made today by their leaders. So with me is a member of the public, and I'm in the midst of sandwiched between the members of the public here at the Uhuru Gardens, and maybe engage one of them here. Asante sana mama, tafadhali anza na jina lako na utueleze what's your expectation today?
Kwa majina naitwa Veronica Mwaneki, mimi ni mtoka Karatina. Nimefurahi kwa siku ya leo ya Jamhuri Day. Na nimefurahi kwanza kusikia tumefikisha Kenya imefikisha miaka 60 tangu ipiganie uhuru. Na tena na expect leo tukitajiwa viongozi wenye wamepigania hii nchi yetu ya Kenya kama warriors. Nimefurahi sana, na tena ndio maana niliamua leo nikuje hapa Jamhuri Day, Uhuru Garden kuja kucelebrate Jamhuri Day, sababu naona ni siku ambayo sio ya kawaida kwangu, ni siku ambayo kubwa sana katika maisha yangu. Sijai hudhuria siku ya kama ya leo.
Naona una furaha. Labda tumuongeleshe mzee hapa, uanze na jina lako na utueleze matumaini yako ni yapi?
Kwa jina naitwa Stuma. Matumaini yangu kwa vile Kenya inatupeleka, haitupeleke mzuri, maana uchumi umekuwa mbaya. Hata wenye waliuanzilishi wa hii nchi wanapoamka saa hii waone vile nchi iko, ama waone ile utupe inatolewa kwa saa hii, wanatudanganya kwa mambo ya uongo. Maana hawasemi yale wanayotenda. Wanasema yale nayo ishe tu midomoni, inaenda na upepo. Hata ukiangalia sinagogi, wakati Yesu alipopata watu wakihubiri injili katika nyumba ya Mungu ya uongo, wanafanya biashara, aliwafukuza. Na Kinyara sasa akiamka, watu wote wanaoongea hapo watawafukuza kwa mbio, maana watendi yale inatendeka.
Asante sana, thank you. Maybe now to get the views of the others who are here as well, some, because we have a seated audience and we expect the number to be about 30,000 according to the Interior and National Administration Principal Secretary, Dr. Raymond Omolo, and as you can see, all of them is somewhat upbeat and focused on the day's relevance in the history of this country, and probably talk to also a Kenyan here who is seated. Labda tuanze na jina lako na utueleze matumaini yako siku ya leo ni yapi?
Kwa majina naitwa Jeremia Kariuki, na kuna matumaini yangu ni vile tutapata, tumeona mambo imefanya mzuri ya hiyo miaka 60 na tumeona vizuri, tumeongozwa vizuri, sipokuwa ni vile watu wanaona hatuendi sawa, lakini kama tukiangalia vizuri lazima tuendelee kulipa kodi ndio nchi yetu iendelee mbele. Hiyo ndio nimesema.
Asante sana, thank you. Sam, he is also just among the many members of the public who are here this morning and for this very special day in Kenya's calendar since becoming a republic and gaining independence from the British colonialists, and to just get their view as well as to what they think ought to be done right in terms of course correcting what has been the political, economic and social mess in this country that from the onset the infant administration set out and embarked on, but rather again 6 years later appears to be a problem that dots the country's policy making processes. Maybe engaging a youth here since it's themed around mambo ya vijana, creative economy and sports. Labda wanze na jina lako, na wewe ni kijana, naona una matumaini gani siku leo hapa ukiwa katika bustani ya Uhuru Gardens?
Asanteni, naitwa Kevin Muturi kutoka Embakasi West. Tumekuja na George Deuri na hii uradi ni poa sana juu vijana wamekam na najua hapa tutatoka na kitu ya maana sana. Nashukuru.
And there are also many other youth, some, because this is also a concerning point for the government or any other government, and the president yesterday spoke about it. Na naona nyinyi vijana, labda utueleze leo matumaini yako ni yapi? What are your expectations today? Umesikia serikali imeongelelea sana mambo ya vijana.
Kitu na expect leo ni tusikize venye rais atabanja, at least atuambie ni future gani anatuwekea si kama vijana. Bado huko nje unajua vitu si rahisi.
Unaonaje rais akibonga mambo ya digital economy, akisema vijana lazima watumie social sites, mambo ya sports, na amefocus sana hapo? Unaona kama vijana watafaidika na hiyo, ama kutakuwa na manufaa kwa vijana kutumia digital platforms kupata kazi ama kupata wera?
Lazima itatusaidia sana. Huko nje mayouth wengi wako na talent. Unaona, at least akichip into stuff like that, at least wase wengi watapata kitu. Yeah. Sana hivyo ndio tunaona.
Okay, Sam. I see also there is another Kenyan who is about to speak. Naona wewe ni kijana sana, rais amebonga mambo ya wera, vijana watumie platforms kama social media sites.
Okay, unfortunately we lost it wakiongea kuhusu wera, and of course, and something else he said. I don't want to repeat. So now, again, we're supposed to be celebrating,
yes,
but there appears to be a lot of challenges. And he points out to the question of the competencies and the skills that we have. What are your thoughts about transforming that to an extent that people are not just waiting for the government to create? We are now getting into the position of creating even amongst ourselves. Because if you were to look even at the fiscal space that the government is in, it is highly impossible that they have resources to invest in all these things that you're talking about, because much of the resources are first of all going to service the debt situation.
Sam, I'd like to appreciate that we cannot separate politics from the economy. And there are many things that government can do without necessarily seeming like they want to collect resources, collect revenues. But there's a lot that they can do to create an environment where people can be in business, people can thrive in business, people can create opportunities. Things like licenses, there are things that are legislatively that can be removed or reduced to ensure that people are able to run businesses on their own. But when we see, when young people see that every time we have elections, we have a winner takes it all. If it is the Kikuyus who are president, if it's a Kikuyu who wins the presidency, then many Kikuyus are going to be in government. So what does it mean for other young bright minds who are spread across the country? So we need to rethink how we even play our politics. We have tried a lot with many documents, including our Constitution of Kenya 2010. And when we look at the time when that Constitution was passed, it was at a time when we had just been on the wake of the 2007 post-election violence. It was more of a peace document than a governance document that needs a lot of reviews today. We have seen the gaps with the Constitution of Kenya, and we need to tighten them, because when you talk about devolution of resources, and we have some kids in central Kenya getting less allocations for bursaries compared to other kids in northern Kenya. That's a disparity issue. That's a disparity issue that needs to be addressed, and that has come across or come our way because of the Constitution of Kenya. And when we want to bring in more inclusion, then we are making it even more exclusive. So there's a lot that we need to do as a country, even when we talk about how we run our elections. If what we saw with the recommendations from the BBI, which is now we are also seeing from the NADCO report, it shows that there's a pressing problem in our governance aspect. That's why I say we cannot separate politics from the economy. Because how we run our country already with the little resources that we have, we can be able to do so much. If we avoid leakages where we talk about corruption and when we are very serious in terms of running the country, I think we can do much better. We've seen even from our school days, you go to school with no shoes, no uniform, going in with 2 meals per day, but with hard work and resilience, you get to scale the heights. It's the same case even when you're running your home, when you have very minimal resources. The same case that applies to the macroeconomics of the country. How we use the little resources that we have is what is going to, to ensure that we transform as a country. There's no nation in the world that has so much that now we have so much that we even want to give away what we have. So we need to work with the little resources that we have. We need to stop having excuses. We need to stop playing politics. There's so much we need to do. Even when we talk about political parties transitions across the times in Kenya. When you look at 1992, where Kenyans fought for multi-party democracy, and how the issues were at that time because of the politics that were played at that time. And then moving on to 2002, when we had Moi now leaving power and leaving it over to Kibaki, and the political situation at that time, igniting hope and a success times to be seen forth by Kenyans at that time. And now that we are looking at a country in darkness, there's a lot that we need to address in terms of even leaving out the issues of resources, even a matter of inclusivity, giving Kenyans the opportunity to work and serve their country. Because I think the president of Kenya currently thinks that because he won this election without system, without deep state, he also wants to run this country himself. He needs to allow his people to work. He needs to allow and create an environment where other people can also contribute to the success and the progress of this nation. When you talk about freedom of the press, this is something that Kenyans have been fighting for years, and we've enjoyed that in the past 20 years with Mwai Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta. But now we are coming to a time where even political parties like my political party, Jubilee Party, is having several issues in court just because there are few people who do not want to see the success of the party or to see alternative voices speaking on the issues of Kenyans. So there is so much that we can do in the political space that can give Kenyans the opportunity to thrive, to grow, to go to school, and to enjoy being a shujaa in Kenya.
I hear you, and you speak of the Constitution as a peace document of 2010, and many gaps that need to be fixed. You also speak about bursaries, that central Kenya, for instance, or Mount Kenya region is disadvantaged. But are these the right things that you are dealing with? Because if a larger section of the population needs assistance, then that's a symptom to a bigger problem. It's not necessarily that you need to increase the number of constituencies or even the allocations to those constituencies. How should we run the education system in the country? Because this is a public good.
And education, as you've rightfully said, it's a public good, and it should be seen more of an investment and not as an expenditure. So a lot of our resources should go to education and to see to it that the education sector is well empowered. Even when you look at, let's say, for example, when we talk about student leaders in Kenya, we are not even allowing that space to thrive, because that is the advocacy wing of the education sector. When you look at student leaders in Kenya and in universities are not able to articulate some of the issues that are pressing them in terms of paying school fees and financing their lifestyles in school. I mean, there's so much we can do as a country to invest in the education sector to ensure that, things are governed properly. Because what did we see with the KCPE results? We are not even sure whether all students sat the same exam across the country. Things to do with governance, even not necessarily resources, but even ensuring that the governance of the education sector is properly maintained. Then we can be able to see that we can churn out better students from school. Okay. We can have... Sorry?
No, it's okay. I hear you.
Yeah.
But I think you're drifting away from the question I'm asking.
Okay.
So, Dr. Kanenje,
yes.
Yeah. Tell me, because the moment that most families are not able to afford education, they actually need bursaries to go to secondary school. They get to the university, and there's been a crisis for a whole 4 months as students wait for resources from the government when it comes to the university funding model. Then it tells you there's a problem that the households themselves cannot even afford themselves. So do we treat supporting through bursary, or do we treat what is going to give a bigger cake that has more resources at the family level?
You know, I'm glad today I'm sitting between very powerful ladies in this country, and they're not where we used to be all the leaders of tomorrow. They're actually leaders of today. Education should never be a privilege for the few. Has always, should always, and must always be a right for everybody and every citizen. That is the basis of national development. It's the basis of national imagination of what is possible. Many of us, in all fairness, if education was merely a privilege for the few, then a rural boy like me, who probably wore shoes for the first time in Form 1, would not have had a chance to be sitting here and talking to you, or to be talking to anyone across the world, or to have served as a professor in an American institution. But because we did not start by making it a privilege, we made it a right. It was possible, and we made it affordable enough that even poor kids from rural areas can be able to go to school. Increasingly, and for no fault of a single or particular personal leader, progressively we're moving in a direction where education is actually becoming a privilege for the few, especially those who can afford. Now, bursaries are always important, but bursaries should only come in to supplement, and should only come in for those who are most in need. Should not become the norm of funding education. We're having a crisis, especially when it comes to funding of education, across the board. But we're also having a crisis when it comes to the systems of education we are actually putting in place. I think 2 weeks ago, elsewhere, I said we moved, for instance, this KCPE this year is probably the last time we're seeing KCPE, right? Yeah. Now, we're having a CBC system which is already taken root, and some people think is good. Some people have contrary opinion. Now, my worry is, before we moved into CBC to start with, what was wrong with the previous system? If it didn't work, what is it that did not work and why? Now, CBC, what guarantees are there that's going to succeed? Now, one of the things we've been doing as a nation, we've been hopping from one model to another, and not just in education, several things, with without basing it on data, without basing it on evidence, without basing on research that whether something is actually feasible. And so at every point and at every election, new election, we turn the entire country, and even worse, children of this country, into guinea pigs for experimentation of models. No country can ever grow and has ever grown based on experimenting things on a national scale. We experiment things in pilot projects to see the efficacy of it. If it doesn't work, we dump it. But when we start experimenting everything on entire nations, it becomes a challenge. And today, as we speak, there are a lot of parents out there who cannot afford education of their own kids. This is something that would actually have given them hope for the future. So what are we looking at? Even as we aspire to export labor, for instance, how can you export labor that is not there? During Obama's presidency, when he was very keen to train people who had lost their jobs and emphasizing the fact that the United States was falling behind other countries, he said, a country that out-educates others will always outcompete you. And a country that does not invest sufficiently in its most vulnerable populations will always lag behind. Even though he added, even to the gender dimension, that a country that leaves half of its population outside, it cedes half of its potential for growth. Are we practically recognizing these realities? These are not theoretical concepts. These are practical aspects. And so the investment, we need to have a discussion. We cannot afford to be reactionary, responding to crisis after crisis. Anybody with brothers or sisters or with children who are trying to get into school and college, you realize how expensive it is. It's not sustainable.
Right. More things to think about. Ayuba Bikadio is now